You know that person, right? The one who is just meticulously organized. Their life seems to run on perfect schedules, strict rules, and absolute order. Well, today we're diving into a topic that gets mixed up all the time in everyday conversation. We're going to explore that fine line between just having a strong personality trait and a pervasive disorder. Let's get into it.
We've all heard this, haven't we? I mean, maybe you've even said it yourself. It's become this go-to phrase for loving a tidy space or needing things to be just so. And, it seems harmless enough. Just a casual way to say you're a little particular.
But what if I told you that for a whole lot of people who say this, the term they're actually, maybe unknowingly describing is something completely different? Yeah, this super common mix-up often points to another condition, one that's really misunderstood. So let's pull back the curtain and talk about Obsessive-Compulsive Personality Disorder, or OCPD. This is the one that often gets mistaken for its more famous cousin, OCD, especially when we're talking about things like perfectionism and a need for order.
So what exactly is OCPD at its core? Well, it's what's called a pervasive pattern. Think of it as a deep-seated preoccupation with order, with perfectionism, and with having control over everything. This goes way beyond just liking a clean desk. It is a fundamental part of how a person sees and interacts with the world. So how does a personality style like this actually show up in someone's day-to-day life? Well, it appears as a really consistent pattern of specific traits, and these are the very things that are key to a clinical diagnosis.
For someone to be diagnosed with OCPD, they need to show a persistent pattern of at least 4 specific traits from a list of 8. So, we're going to walk through some of the most prominent ones right now, the kinds of red flags that pop up when that pursuit of perfection starts to backfire.
Okay, so the first major red flag is when perfectionism actually starts to sabotage itself. This isn't the helpful kind of perfectionism that, pushes you to do great work. No, this is when the standards are so impossibly high that projects get delayed or even totally abandoned, just because they can never be perfect enough. The main goal gets completely lost in all the tiny details. Then you've got this all-consuming devotion to work and productivity. And here's the crucial part. This goes way beyond what's actually needed for financial security. It's a relentless drive that just consistently shoves relationships, hobbies, and any kind of fun to the back burner.
This intense need for everything to be absolutely right often leads to a third pattern, a major reluctance to delegate anything. And why is that? It's because of this deep-seated belief that nobody else can possibly do the task to their own exacting standards. It simply has to be done their way to be considered correct.
And finally, this inflexibility, it stretches to their entire worldview. We're talking about a super strict, black and white adherence to rules, morals, schedules, you name it. There's very little room for compromise or any kind of nuance, which can make the person come across as incredibly stubborn and overly judgmental of, well, everyone, including themselves.
Okay, this brings us to the most critical part of this whole conversation. Finally, clearing up the confusion between OCPD and OCD once and for all. They sound almost identical, right? Just one little letter separates them. But in the world of psychology, that single letter represents a massive, massive difference in how these conditions are experienced and understood.
Here it is, the most fundamental distinction you need to know. OCPD is a personality disorder. It's literally woven into the fabric of a person's identity and their way of seeing the world. OCD, on the other hand, is an anxiety disorder. It's driven by specific, unwanted thoughts that cause a ton of distress and lead to compulsive behaviors to try and relieve that anxiety. Let's break down the internal experience, because this is where the two conditions really truly diverge. It all comes down to how the person views their own behavior. Someone with OCPD typically believes their way of doing things, their rigidity, their perfectionism, is the right way, the correct way. But in contrast, a person with OCD is often painfully aware that their intrusive thoughts and compulsions are irrational and feel like a terrifying invasion. And this brings us to a really key psychological concept. The patterns of OCPD are what we call ego-syntonic. Basically, this just means the behaviors and values are in harmony with the person's self-image. Their actions feel logical, natural, and even desirable. OCD is the complete opposite. It's ego-dystonic, meaning the thoughts and compulsions are unwanted, deeply distressing, and feel totally alien to the person's true self. So, if we go beyond the clinical definitions,
What does it actually mean to live with OCPD? I mean, how does this rigid lens affect daily life, work, and especially relationships?
Well, it often creates a common and really unfortunate chain reaction. You can almost see the dominoes fall. The intense focus on work and productivity, it just doesn't leave much room for anything else. Friendships get neglected, hobbies disappear, and that naturally leads to really strained personal relationships. Loved ones can end up feeling ignored, constantly criticized, or totally controlled.
And the impact doesn't stop there. Living with such rigid, impossibly high standards is just plain exhausting. It often leads to chronic anxiety and stress. The workaholism, the frequent conflicts with people, and this constant feeling of failure. It can all significantly increase the risk for developing depression.
Now, while OCPD is a chronic condition, that doesn't mean there's no hope for change. Not at all. Management is absolutely possible, and the goal is often to help the individual find just a little bit more flexibility in their thinking and their behavior.
The cornerstone of treatment is psychotherapy. Therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT can directly challenge those rigid thought patterns and the need for perfection. Other approaches might dig a little deeper to explore the emotional reasons for needing so much control. Now, medication isn't a primary fix for the personality traits themselves, but it can be really helpful for managing the anxiety or depression that so often come along for the ride.
So at the end of all this, we're left with a pretty crucial question to think about. In a society that praises productivity and perfection, where do we actually draw the line? At what point does a strong work ethic where being organized stop being a virtue and start becoming a rigid, harmful pattern that costs us our relationships and our own peace of mind? It's definitely something worth reflecting on.